Hey guys, Dr. Michael Young here. Hope your semester is going well. We are going into our third week. Topic we're discussing this week is near and dear to my heart, international. I would like to see you guys get a global mindset. In fact, our discussion topic for this week is, would you like to study for free in Hong Kong? I'm going to do a separate video on that. Right now, I'm just going to talk a little bit about international, just like the last couple of times. Touch on a few things here, try to bring the material to life to make it a bit more interesting and a little bit less boring. Alright, so let's get started. One of the main reasons to look outside of West Virginia. West Virginia is 1.7 million people. Global population is about 8 billion people. There's a huge world outside of West Virginia, right? And so not only is it a huge world full of people and lots of interesting things to see, lots of interesting things to do, but lots of money to be made. Most of the time we're talking about international business, we're usually, at least initially, talking about importing and exporting. And one of the things that's made international, this process of globalization that's taken place over the past 20, 30 years, meant that the world has become smaller because air travel got a lot cheaper, not necessarily so anymore, it's gone up again. The price of shipping goods got a lot cheaper through container ports where they can load and unload boats, ships a lot easier, and the ships got a lot easier, and so they were able to use economies of scale. And also, tastes began to converge because of communication, the internet. People began to see what everyone else is doing. And until recently, and maybe to a certain extent still, a lot of this was led by the United States as the one of the prime countries that were setting some of the standards culturally. Some of my foreign friends may disagree with that, but having visited lots of other countries, I feel like the United States still has a lot of soft power in the area of culture and movies and fashion and music and that sort of stuff. And sports. Sports is something that's become worldwide. When I traveled to China, as I often did, NBA in particular was really, really popular in China. And this created a lot of business opportunities for American sports companies. And Nike and athletic footwear and athletic goods and services created a market worldwide for that. And if you look at world population, where we live here in North America, the United States is a big country in terms of population. In fact, I believe it's number 3 behind China and India. Actually, India number 1, China number 2, and the United States number 3. But if you look at North America, it's pretty small in terms of total population. This is by continent. And Oceania, mostly Australia, is even less. South America, 5.5%, a little bit more. You got Europe at around 10%, Africa around 17%. The vast majority, 60% of the world's population, lives in Asia. You have the big countries there, and many other countries just huge. Like Indonesia is 150 million people, huge country. Philippines has become a really large country in terms of population because of their population growth. But you got Bangladesh, you got Pakistan, you got a lot of these countries that are very densely populated. Same time though, you got this little country here. I don't know if you can see it, but this is Mongolia, a country I visited maybe 6 or 7 years ago. That's the least densely populated country in the entire world. And so it's interesting that it's right in the middle of Asia, but still very sparsely populated. 60% of the population lives in this whole area. And there are huge swaths of Siberia here, part of Russia, that are very sparsely populated. So that just shows you how densely populated Asia is. World population, we've been worried about it growing and growing and growing, and it's still a concern. I mean, we have too many people probably for the world's resources. It's hard for us to support the population that we have. But a new problem you may have heard of is population decline. Some countries are already experiencing a decline of population, sometimes, and so it's quite severe. Like, for example, Japan's population is decreasing actually pretty rapidly. China has begun to experience a population decrease. Korea is facing a very severe problem in that fertility. And these countries typically, unlike the United States, they can't take in immigrants, right? Because they're kind of closed. Their population, it's harder to penetrate, and they're not as welcoming to immigrants as it's the United States. And so this means that they're kind of facing a difficult situation. The United States, even if we didn't have immigration, we would not be maintaining our population growth. Much of our population growth is due to the fact that we have a net inflow of people, a net inflow of immigration versus emigration. So that's something to think about, the population decline and the problems that that's going to create. This is an interesting little graph. I lived in Hong Kong for nearly 20 years. It's number 3 on this graph. UK is ranked as the number 1 country for doing business. You got Sweden, then Hong Kong, Netherlands, New Zealand, Canada, Denmark, Singapore, Australia, and Switzerland. Interesting. The United States is not showing up on this particular survey. Why should we trade with other nations? Well, one reason is that different nations have different skill sets, different resources, and so this means that countries like Venezuela with lots of oil but little technology, trade with other countries like Japan with little oil but lots of technology, lots of population. And so there's no doubt that free trade means that the economic pie is bigger for the whole world. Now, there are winners and losers whenever we have trade, but it's almost beyond dispute that increased trade increases total GDP. However, free trade is not all rainbows and lollipops. There are some problems with free trade. One of the things about free trade is that, not everybody benefits. Some people actually are harmed. The benefits clearly are not distributed evenly. For consumers like you and me, it allows us to go and buy more with the money that we have. We're able to buy things cheaper, maybe higher quality, have more selection. But for domestic manufacturing companies in the United States, a developed country, you might have some workers there that are forced to take pay cuts, and they're moving their operations overseas. I'll bet that you have sat around the dinner table and listened to family members or other people talk about free trade, and they say, this cheap stuff coming in from China and these other places are costing us jobs. So again, although it's almost beyond dispute that free trade creates more, makes more goods and services, those benefits are not spread evenly. Another reason to get involved in exporting is that you may experience less competition for your products abroad. Believe it or not, the United States is still very, very competitive in lots of products, and there are lots of countries that would like to buy U.S. products if they're allowed to. And so this is an opportunity for U.S. businesses. Something that's happening all around the world are this social influencers. Some of these are getting global influence, not just in their own tiny little corner of the world. And so, social media is playing a big role even in international. A lot of times when we're talking about trade, people will talk about the balance of trade. And surplus is when your exports are greater than your imports. The deficit is when your imports are greater than your exports. Countries typically would like to run a trade surplus, because this is usually better for their economy. And it also means they don't have to borrow money from other countries to pay for their essentially, if they're running a trade deficit, you're consuming more than you're producing, so you have to borrow the money. And most countries would like to avoid that. Whenever we're first get involved in international business, we can choose from a very low level of commitment to a very high level of commitment, and a very lower level of risk to a higher level of risk as we're going along this spectrum. Amount of commitment, control, risk, and profit potential. Yeah, so profit also. Remember we talked about the trade-off between risk and reward. Well, the more risk you take, hopefully the more reward you'll reap. Starting out here, we got licensing, exporting, franchising, contract manufacturing. That's where you go out and hire someone to manufacture your product for you. Then you got international joint ventures and strategic alliances. And finally, foreign direct investment. And moving from this side to this side, you can see we're moving from the least to the most in terms of commitment, control, risk, and profit potential. This is something that students always find interesting, is that products are different, even for American companies, whenever they're in different countries. For example, here are some examples of what's sold at McDonald's. Right? Malaysia, they got something called Bubur Ayam McD. Chicken strips and porridge with onions, ginger, and shallots. Arabia in Egypt. Grilled chicken with tahina sauce, lettuce, tomato, and onion on Arabic bread. I've also heard, I've never been to India, but I heard that McDonald's in India will not sell you a beef burger, right? Because, they don't eat cows there. So they'll sell you a tofu burger or maybe some other type of burger, a veggie burger, but no beef burger. I know from my own personal experience, and this is not McDonald's, but at KFC. When I would go to KFC near my home in Hong Kong, and I would go there pretty often actually, because I like to eat American food whenever I could. I love Chinese food, but you gotta get American food every now and then when you're in America. And they would have some odd things there, like they would have as a side order, you couldn't really get mashed potatoes or green beans, the things that we would typically get. Coleslaw. Asians don't really like coleslaw. I think the Chinese people don't really like coleslaw. Occasionally you get some of those things, but not really. You could get something called mushrooms on rice. It was a mushroom sauce on rice, which I've never seen in any American KFC before. And another thing, kind of a spicy squid sauce on rice that you can get at McDonald's in Hong Kong, China. Where's your car made? We think of Ford and Chevy as being American brands, but looking at this, we see that the percent of American parts in a Fusion is only 30%. So that's made in Mexico. Chevy Malibu is only 66%. Oddly enough, the car with the most American content is the Toyota Camry. Hey, that's made right here in West Virginia. At least parts of it are made right here in good old Buffalo, West Virginia, the engine. So yeah, now that we're in this global economy, you can't really trust brand names when you're thinking about whether a product is domestic or foreign. What makes international trade, international travel, international business special and interesting is the different socio-cultural values, beliefs, customs, institutions. Going around the world and seeing all of these different things is one of the most exciting things that people can do. Term that gets used sometimes is this idea of ethnocentricity. It's my belief that every culture is at least a little bit ethnocentric, because each of us sees the world from our own perspective, and each of us sees the world as the way that we do things. And most people have never traveled outside their home country. And as a result, they haven't seen the way that other people do things, and so they just naturally assume that the way that they do things is the right way to do it. Yeah, it's important to understand this when you start traveling abroad and realize that you're in a different country and expect to see some culture shocks. One of the things they talk about in this chapter is exchange rates. And exchange rates is the value of a currency. Actually, on international financial markets, what's happening is currencies are being bought and sold or traded for one another. And the relative price of those currencies fluctuates. So, speaking of the US dollar, high dollar value means that you can buy more of a foreign currency with a dollar. Low dollar value means that the currency is probably experiencing depreciation and that it's able to buy less. And the US currently has a floating exchange rate system, and so supply and demand for dollars is what determines the value of dollar on global exchange, global financial markets. When a dollar is up, and the dollar is actually still up right now. The dollar was extremely high about a year ago. Now it's come down some, but it's still relatively high, which means that if you want to travel to other countries right now, you're going to get a pretty good deal. You'll be able to buy a lot. It also means that when foreign tourists come here, they won't be able to get as much with their currency as they could whenever the dollar is weak. What about exporters? Exporters like to see a weak dollar, right? Exporters would like to see the dollar weak, because a weak dollar means that if someone in Japan wants to buy an American product, it's just gotten a lot cheaper for the Japanese person without affecting the profits of the American exporter. Because countries would like to see trade surplus in most cases, they often engage in protectionism. It's a controversial topic. One of the ways that they protect their home markets is by imposing tariffs, a tax, which is a tax imposed on imports. These can be for protective reasons to protect their home producers, or it can be to generate revenue for the home government. Any tariff will do both of these, but whenever they're implemented, they may have a specific reason of doing one or the other. Should the U.S. government try to protect jobs? Should it try to protect certain industries? This is, again, it's not nearly a cut and dried issue. The United States is a member of the World Trade Organization, and so in theory they're supposed to abide by the rules of the World Trade Organization, which we're going to talk about next. And whenever there is free trade, no protectionism, again, it benefits some people more than others, right? So we've seen this type of thing before on TV. We may have seen it just as we're driving up and down the road around Charleston. People claiming that offshoring costs them jobs and would like to see the government impose things to protect their jobs. So one of the reasons that this vast globalization that took place over the past 20, 30 years is one of the reasons that the populism, populism, the Make America Great Again movement, and these types of political parties were pushing to have more protection for U.S. workers, and so they had a lot of support among those types of people. While there is no real final arbiter in trade disputes, trade protectionism, most countries of the world, 164 of the countries of the world, belong to the World Trade Organization. And the World Trade Organization is an organization that, when countries join this, they agree to abide by the dispute mechanisms. They agree to abide by the rules of the organization which try to promote free trade, because everyone knows that free trade, if it's free trade and fair trade, that the world will be better off if people could manage free trade. The entire global economy would definitely increase. So, yeah, the World Trade Organization is probably the premier trade regulating body whose membership is voluntary. Not all countries belong to it. What's going to happen in the future concerning trade? Well, this is a little bit old, guys. This is not quite correct. I don't know if you realize it, but this says that India is smaller than China, and that's not the case now. About a year ago, India passed China to become the most populous country. Russia has invaded Ukraine, which has caused huge problems. The Russian ruble is at its lowest rate. It's like a record, like 30 or 40 years. So it's almost like since the fall of the Soviet Union, the ruble hasn't been as low as it is now, and that's causing a lot of problems for Russia's economy. Brazil and South America also experiencing problems. I don't know if you're following what's happening in Ecuador, or if we have students in here from Ecuador, but there's a lot of violence involved now that we're reading every day concerning the elections that are taking place in Ecuador right now. China also is having problems. China is, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years is going to have a very severe, very hard time at growing, and might even see a recession, which is something that they haven't seen for a long time. A very fast growing economy. It's partly due to overbuilding in their housing market and some other stuff. So, yeah, we're kind of in this period of deglobalization, whether we like it or not. Globalization, travel between these different countries, trade between these different countries, business between these different countries, it's going to slow and maybe even shrink to some extent as the amount of expansion and spanning between countries actually decreases. But that doesn't, I don't want to discourage you about getting a global mindset, because chances are this won't last forever. It would be great if you could study foreign language, learn about foreign cultures, and take global business courses to help develop a global perspective. Globalization is real. The more you know about the world outside of your immediate area, the better off you're going to be. In terms of your career, in terms of quality of your life, in terms of lots of other things. So, yeah, what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about whether you would like to study for free in Hong Kong, which I'm going to post. I'm going to create another video now dealing specifically with that and post that up there for our second graded discussion, which is coming right up.